r/entitled parents. Karen's middle seat, not actually hers. Story 1. Another Karen on a plane post reminded me of this lovely experience last month. Due to a new procurement process cluster at work that nobody cares about, I booked a flight to my conference destination really late. All that was left were middle seats or paying personally for an upgrade, which wasn't going to happen for a relatively short flight. Out in the boarding area, they announced many times that it was a full flight and kept begging people to gate check their bags. It wasn't subtle. After they let all the military, first class, frequent flyers, and blah blah blah, I need more time people board, my group got to plod down the jetway. Once we got onto the plane, I could see my fate before me. A wild Karen was sitting in an aisle seat. The middle was piled with Karen crap, her backpack, electronic devices, stuffed animals, snacks. And a miniature Karen was over in the window seat, happily kicking the empty seat in front of her so hard it was visibly shaking. Oh joy, that's definitely mine. When I got off to the row, I pointed to the middle seat to indicate it was mine. Karen did not budge or move a single thing from that crap hinge. I tried again with the whole, sorry, that's my seat, routine. She snapped at me, sit somewhere else. I can't do that. Full flight. This is my assigned seat. Well, Karen wasn't having that. Did I know what kind of day she'd had? It started the day before, apparently. Their flight was diverted, they missed their connection, they slept at the airport overnight, and they just need a little space. Sit somewhere else. And she shoved her knees full up against the seat in front of her, blocking my way into the crappy seat even before she loaded it with Karen's Cruft's middle seat. Then she shut her eyes and pretended to be asleep. I slammed the flight attendant button over her head and awkwardly crouched in the row behind her so people could get past. We'd already made a scene and clogged up the board. As I crouched there, I realized nothing about Karen's story made sense. We weren't at the big city airport where flights sometimes get diverted. We were at the tiny regional airport that only had a couple of airlines that flew to a few major hubs. No connections occurred there. There also wasn't a bunch of other people griping about missed connections, diversions, or having slept in the airport. When a tiny region has that happen, you know. Everybody knows. Karen was probably full of shit. Anyway, the saintly flight attendant, SFA, arrived to ask what was wrong. She checked my ticket. Yeah, unfortunately, that was my seat. Then she asked Karen to see her and the kids' tickets. Karen kept her eyes closed and continued to pretend to be asleep. I don't know how she thought that would work, but the flight attendant shook her shoulder several times and kept speaking loudly to her. You must remember that boarding is still going on all around this. People were hefting bags, trying to find seats, and causing the usual loud mayhem. It was ridiculous. SFA finally told Karen that if she didn't respond, paramedics would be called due to an unresponsive passenger. That got Karen's attention. She popped up and demanded, "What? I'm trying to sleep," and then went off on the same rant she did with me about her travel nightmare and needing the space. SFA explained that it was a full flight, all the seats were booked, standby passengers were waiting for any extras, and Karen needed to let me sit. This sent Karen into a fit of crying over being separated from her baby by a stranger. SFA pointed out that she booked the aisle and window seats herself, leaving that separation so she could either ask me to swap or sit in them as assigned. That set off another rant. Apparently, some frequent flyer or travel advice site out there says to book the window or aisle and hope nobody sits in the middle so you get free space. I imagine this works on flights that aren't full. This one was full. Karen swore she got that tip for how to get an extra seat free off the airline's website, and threw quite the fit that after they told her to do that, she was being punished by being separated from her baby. Meanwhile, the people in the row in front arrived and Mini Karen was still kicking away like she was at soccer practice. It was so bad that the guy in the window seat didn't even want to sit down. He leaned over and asked the kid to stop kicking. Mini Karen let out an unholy wail of "stranger" that she had apparently been trained to do if a stranger spoke to her. Karen turned from her screaming fit at the flight attendant to take in the scene of an adult man in the row in front looking at her child in horror and the child wailing "stranger" at the top of her lungs, only to turn right back to the flight attendant while pointing at the dude and demanding, "Get this pet off this plane immediately." That's where SFA went from firm and reasonable to utterly brilliant. She sagely nodded at Karen, saying, "We can't remove him from the flight because he hasn't done anything to your child, but we can certainly get you two reseated if you're not comfortable with your current location and situation. Gather your things, we'll take you up to the desk and see if there are any upgrades available to the more spacious seats." It was amazing. Karen puffed up in self-importance as she gathered her now happy spawn and all their crap. She threw elbows like mad, shoving their way upstream past all the people still trying to board. She'd heard the magic word "upgrade," and she was going to get there before it was gone. And I sort of cursed to myself that they probably were going to upgrade her to make her calm the bleep down. And I was not thrilled that her ridiculous display actually worked. Then SFA's coworker came back to ask if I preferred the window or aisle for my middle seat. Aisle, thanks. At least I got that right. It got better. SFA's coworker explained that I could relax because Karen and EK wouldn't be returning. There were no upgrades. It was faster and easier to get them off the flight that way than by calling security. They filled the seats with waiting standby passengers, and presumably Karen had plenty of space to sit next to her mini Karen in the terminal while waiting for the next flight. Well played, SFA. Well played.
Shh, here's a little secret for you. This video is sponsored by none other than me and my team at Rufus Rugs. We're the masters of creating custom, hand-tufted rugs that capture who you truly are. Whether you want to transform one of our intriguing thumbnails into a rug, for a friend, obviously, or you're craving a room makeover with awesome anime-inspired designs, we've got your back. Oh, and did I mention, each and every rug is skillfully handcrafted by me and my friends. No BS dropshipping gimmick here. You'll be blown away by your rug. Hit the first link in the description to learn more.
Story 2. r/entitled parents. An entitled mother rips open the doors on my ambulance, and it does not end well for her. So this just happened last night, and I still can't believe someone would actually do this. I'm a 30-year-old paramedic, and I've been in EMS for the past 8 years. I absolutely love my job. Last night, we were dispatched to a 75-year-old female who fell at home. The patient stated that she tripped over her carpet and hit her head when she fell. We arrived on the scene and noticed that the home was a duplex with our patient's door on the right and her neighbor's door on the left. We made our way into the home and found her lying on the floor. The woman was awake and breathing. We started asking her the standard questions. Are you okay? Does anything hurt? Do you remember the fall, etc.? She stated that she had a pounding headache and that she remembered walking to bed and then walking up on the floor. In my field, that's a pretty big red flag. We noticed that she had a pretty good lump on the side of her head and a big bruise starting to form already. Noticing the bruise, I asked her if she was on any blood thinners. She said that she was on blood thinners for a previous stroke she had a few years ago. We urged her to let us take her to the hospital because there was a possibility that the fall could have caused a bleed in her brain, and she should go to the hospital to get some scans done. She agreed, and we began to package her up. We applied a C-collar around her neck in case of any C-spine neck injuries. She denied any neck or back pain, so we lifted her up and placed her on our stair chair. A stair chair is exactly what it sounds like, a chair with tracks that we use to carry patients up and down stairs. As we were getting her out of the house, her neighbor whipped the door open and started yelling about how she couldn't sleep with all the lights and noises outside. The sound of the stair chair apparently woke her up, and she was not happy about that. My lieutenant walked over to her, apologized, and said that we were dealing with a medical emergency and that we would be leaving soon enough. The neighbor then noticed that our patient was her neighbor, and that's when she started yelling about something totally different. The entitled neighbor started yelling, "You can't take her to the hospital? I have errands to run tomorrow and she needs to watch my kids." My lieutenant again reiterated that we were there for a medical emergency and that her health was more important than her errands. The entitled neighbor let out a loud huff and then slammed the door in his face. We thought that was the end of it. We were wrong. After a few minutes in the back of the ambulance, we told our lieutenant that he could take the engine crew back to the station and that we would be heading out in a few minutes. After we checked her vitals, got an IV going, and started giving her IV fluids, my partner got out of the back and went up to the driver's seat. About 5 seconds later, the back doors of my ambulance flew open, and who do I see? The entitled neighbor, of course. Apparently, she needed a few minutes to get dressed before coming outside. I yelled at her, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She yelled, "I told you that she can't go to the hospital because she has to watch my kids tomorrow." She then started trying to pull the cot out of the ambulance with our patient on it. Luckily, she didn't know how to unlatch the crib and couldn't get her out. Our patient said, "I can't watch your kids tomorrow because I fell and I might be having a stroke." The entitled neighbor yelled back at her, saying, "You're fine. You don't need to go to the hospital because you're not having a stroke." My partner then heard the commotion and went to the back of the ambulance. He pulled her off the cot and I slammed and locked the doors. You could tell that the entitled neighbor was about to become combative. It's important to know that either the police department or the sheriff's department responds to our calls at night too. Because of where we were, it just took a few minutes for the sheriff's department to show up on the scene, but he got there just in time. I couldn't hear much through the door, but I saw the officer get out of his cruiser with his taser drawn. My partner ran back up to the driver's seat and started heading to the hospital. The last thing I saw through the back windows was the entitled neighbor stomping towards the officer and then her hitting the ground after being tased. Super satisfying to watch, too. I was talking with my patient and asked what that was all about, and she said that the entitled neighbor would just drop her 3 young kids off at her house and leave for several hours at a time with no notice. My patient had no idea that she was supposed to watch the kids at all because, again, the entitled neighbor never even gave her a heads up about these things. Like I said in the beginning, this happened last night, so I don't have any updates, but I'll post an update when I learn more. My contact at the hospital said that the patient does not have a bleed. However, she has a really nasty looking bruise on her face from the blood thinners. It's incredibly common. She will most likely be going home soon. There is no update on the neighbor. I probably will not hear anything back until my next shift day. So I got in touch with the officer on that call, and he said that the woman was not formally charged with anything. The patient is back home now and resting comfortably. Like I said before, the hospital found no signs of bleed, and she was discharged the next day. She was advised to file for an order of protection from the neighbor, but I don't believe I'll ever be privy to that information unless something happens again. I read the majority of the comments, and most people are saying to contact elder abuse and DCFS. The only problem with filing those reports is having concrete proof. We never actually saw any children, so we can't really say that they are abused or neglected at all. We can say that we have a suspicion, but for all we know, they could be living their best lives at home with the entitled parent. If the entitled parent had left and abandoned her kids, then that's another story. Calling DCFS without any signs of child abuse and just working off hearsay can just cause more problems if the accusations are unfounded. The same can be pretty much applied to elder abuse. We have no actual proof of elder abuse occurring. The entitled neighbor was not involved in the actual fall, and there was no suspicion of any kind of financial, physical, emotional, or social abuse. The way our patient talked about the kids getting dumped on her was in more of an inconsiderate way and not in an abusive way. Long story short, the entitled neighbor was just kind of an I am, however, hoping that the patient will press charges for assault, but I don't know if she will. Story 3. r/entitled parents. Entitled mom calls the police on me for stealing her daughter, who is my girlfriend and an adult. So some background. This story took place about 5 years ago. My fiance and I have been together for 7 years this month. We were hoping to get married this year, but might postpone due to the circumstances. We were reminiscing about some old stories yesterday when this one came up, and she suggested I share it. She was my girlfriend at the time, and I was fully aware that her mom was a few fries short of a Happy Meal, but this was the pinnacle of her behavior. So here's the cast. M, entitled mom, my future mother-in-law, girlfriend, Ellie, PO, police officer, OP, well, obviously. So here's the story. Ellie and I weren't living together at the time. She just stayed over from time to time when she could. I took her home after she had been staying with me for a couple of days and was heading to work. But shortly after, just before getting to work, I got a phone call from her and I could tell she was in tears. Apparently, when she got inside, M immediately blew up on her about being gone for so long, even though it was only 2 days. And she told M she was going to be gone and kept in contact with her while she was gone. But Ellie just sort of brushed it off and went to her room. M's house was pretty much your stereotypical crazy cat lady house. The house was badly decaying, cats were all over the place, going to the bathroom in random places and whatnot. When Ellie got to her room, she realized that while she was gone, the cats had pissed and spit all over a pile of her clean clothes. But whatever, Ellie decided to just bag them up and she would wash them next time she came to my place. Her mom didn't have a functioning washer at the time, and apparently that really set her off. M apparently thought Ellie was bagging her clothes because she was planning to go back to my place that night and stay another few days. So she stomped into her room, grabbed the bag, ripped it open, and flung the clothes all over the room along with the cat poop and piss while screaming at Ellie that she's not going anywhere. And that's when Ellie ran outside and called me. She was so upset and didn't know what to do. Her mom had been doing crazy stuff to Ellie since I'd been with her, but up until then, I just helped however I could without getting involved or saying a word to her mom. I told her to go ahead and get the things she needs and I'd take her to my place. She said she would love that. I told my boss I was going to be late due to an emergency and turned around to go pick her up. When I pulled back up to the house, Ellie was in the driveway crying. I went and hugged her, told her it was going to be okay and that she could stay with me for as long as she wanted. So she went back inside to get her things. As I was standing outside waiting, I heard the door open again, and I went to help Ellie with her things. Uh-oh, it's her mom. M comes stomping out with her hair crazy and frizzled and an old nightgown. She beelines me and gets right in my face. M, with an extremely thick, high-pitched southern accent. My daughter said I needed to come out and ask what you think of me. I knew that was a blatant lie, as Ellie would never instigate this. You've got something to say? Huh? You think I'm trash, don't you? That's what you think, isn't it? Again, up until now, I'd completely kept my mouth shut and was trying to maintain that. But this woman, she was up in my face, freaking out and tormenting the woman I loved, so I finally looked at her and broke my silence. LP, why do you treat her like this? M, gasp. What do you mean? That's my daughter and I worship the ground she walks on. OP, oh, really? So calling her a whore is worship? Yes, I've heard her say this with my own ears. M, gasp. I would never say anything like that. OP, now I'm getting rather irate. Nonsense, I've heard you say it. M, explosion. You get your ass off my property. Okay, I almost never find myself in situations like this, so I'm not used to it. I say that because after she said this, I pretty much saw red. I'm not proud of it, but I just started shouting every curse word in the book I could possibly think of at the top of my lungs while she went back in the house. But thankfully, that only lasted a few seconds and I immediately calmed down. So finally, Ellie comes back out with her stuff. We put it in the car and I assume it's over. But Ellie turns to me and says, Ellie, I'm sorry, but we can't leave yet. OP, why not? Ellie, sigh. My mom, she called the cops. I sort of had a feeling that would happen, so no big deal. So we just sat and waited for the cop to arrive. After about 10 minutes or so, a cop car pulls up. Right when he does, M comes out of the house and oh my God, she was doing exactly what you think. She immediately puts on the fragile, brittle old lady act, hunched over, walking slowly, the whole gig. And of course, when P.O. asks her what happened, she has to pitch her entire medical chart to the guy. Ellie will tell you that this woman has been terminally ill for 12 years. So when she finally gets done trying to milk this poor guy for sympathy, she tells her version of what happened. M, sir, he came onto my property and verbally attacked me. He's awful to me, sir, and I've never done anything to him. He's turned my daughter against me and is trying to convince her to leave. At first, he seemed somewhat sympathetic to her until he turned to Ellie. P.O. Ma'am, this is your boyfriend? Ellie, yes, sir. P.O. Okay, and how old are you? Ellie, sir, I'm 23. This was my favorite part because the officer looked up from his notepad with a look of, wait, what? Apparently, he was thinking Ellie was a minor or something based on how M was acting, but he quickly realized just what he was dealing with. Eventually, he turns to me. P.O. Okay, sir, please give me your version of what happened. And I did exactly that. Funny side note, at one point, P.O. looks up at me and says, P.O., you look really familiar. Do I know you? It actually turned out that the P.O. and I had gone to high school together. Once we recognized each other, we laughed and shook hands very briefly. This was hilarious because out of the corner of my eye, I saw M having a big scowl on her face as she saw me getting friendly with P.O. But anyway, P.O. puts his notepad away and turns to me. Just FYI, he says the following with his heavy tone. I know that you are fully aware of this and don't believe you are in the wrong at all, but I have to say this as a formality. P.O. Well, OP, she doesn't want you on the property, so be aware that if you come back here, you can technically be charged with trespassing. Do you understand this as I've explained it? OP, absolutely, sir. M, but sir, I want to press charges. P.O, he didn't do anything illegal, ma'am. M, but he verbally assaulted me. P.O, I understand that, and while that was ill-advised, he slightly turns to me and gives me a small gesture with his hand, and I nod in agreement. It's not something I could arrest him for. He agrees that he will not come back on your property without your direct permission. M, okay, fine, whatever. Ellie, come back inside. Ellie, what? No. M, you heard P.O. OP is leaving, and you're staying here. P.O, whoa, ma'am, I didn't say that at all. M, but. P.O, your daughter is not a child, ma'am. She's a fully grown adult, and she has every right to go wherever she wants. M, I'm her mother. She lives under my roof. I told her she needed to stay here, so she needs to stay. P.O. No, ma'am, that's not how it works. If she wants to go stay with her boyfriend, there is absolutely nothing you can do to stop her. M starts to fake crocodile tears and stomps in the house in defeat. Ellie and I thanked the officer, got in the car and left. We've been living together ever since. Happy ending? Believe it or not, M isn't really M anymore. Over the years since that day, M has actually decided to make an effort to try and improve herself. I guess she realized that if she didn't make changes, she would lose her relationship with Ellie. So M started taking advantage of her medical coverage, went to see her psychiatrist, and got medicine for mental illnesses she actually had, as opposed to the ones she would make up. Since then, well, she's actually gotten way better. She takes her medicine regularly and has a boyfriend who was an extremely kind man and treats Ellie as though she were his own daughter. So basically, M isn't really M anymore. We actually get along very well. We see them frequently and we help each other out whenever we can. We actually look back on the early years when she was, in fact, an M and laugh. So not only is everybody getting along well, but we can actually share the cringe stories and happily laugh about them.